Sonic, Tails, the scientist formerly known as Dr. Robotnik. They're all together and celebrating Sonic the Hedgehog's 25th birthday. To help celebrate what I'm sure will be a speedy anniversary, we're taking a look back at Sonic the Hedgehog's 16-bit adventures. Join us as we analyze what magazines like Electronic Gaming Monthly, GamePro, Next Generation, Die Hard Game Fan, and CVG thought of the Sonic games released on the Sega Genesis. Which 16-bit game came out on top? I think the answer may surprise you. Prior to Sonic, Sega had been slowly building momentum for the Genesis with ports of Capcom classics and a string of well-received arcade games. But Sonic was different. Critics knew right from the start that the Blue Hedgehog wasn't going to be another Alex Kidd or Wonder Boy. Sega had a real winner on their hands. Sonic the Hedgehog was deemed the next Super Mario. Released in the summer of 1991, Sonic was met with strong reviews across the board. Megaplay called it the best Sega adventure game yet, and gave it a 10 out of 10. GamePro also gave it a perfect score, calling it a class act all the way. Computers and Video Games and Sega Pro also came out with high scores, giving Sonic grades in the mid to high 90s. Electronic Gaming Monthly was especially impressed with Sega's new mascot. Not only did the editors give the game solid 9s, but they even named Sonic the Hedgehog the best game of 1991. The most popular comparison may be Mario 4 on the Super NES versus Sonic the Hedgehog on the Genesis, but when it comes right down to it, Sonic is the clear winner. While everybody enjoyed the new platformer, a few of the UK magazines were a little less enthusiastic. Megatech noted that the hyped beyond belief character was inspired by Mario and complained about the gameplay. Mega Drive Advanced Gaming agreed, noting that Sonic will not age well. Mean Machine Sega gave the game an 85% and called the game too easy. But even with a few critical reviews, Sonic the Hedgehog still managed to average a score of 90% across 10 different publications. With critics and consumers flocking to Sonic the Hedgehog, Sega knew they had a hit on their hands. They followed the platformer up with a speedy sequel that introduced gamers to Miles, Tails, Prowers, and even faster gameplay. Critics were completely caught up in the excitement over blast processing, giving the sequel even stronger scores than the original. Electronic Gaming Monthly's Ed Samarad gave the game a rare 10 out of 10, calling it the best all-around game on the market. GamePro agreed, giving it a flawless 5 out of 5 and saying that the best thing about Sonic 2 is that it's just plain fun. While Game Informer didn't give it perfect scores, they did name it the best action-adventure game of the year in their first annual Video Game Awards. No magazine was more impressed than Mean Machine Sega, who went from giving the original an 85% to giving the sequel a 96%. That's just 1 point away from tying Eternal Champions and Echo the Dolphin as the top-rated Genesis game of all time. They said that Sonic 2 was faster, slicker, more colorful, louder, bigger, and much, much tougher than the original. They also called it a blinding stonker, whatever that means. While there are a few magazines that gave Sonic 2 scores in the high 8s, the majority of the reviews saw 9s and 10s. That brings the average up to 93%. While it looks and feels like a typical 2D platformer, Sonic the Hedgehog CD was always a little different. Between the time travel gimmick, the wide-open bonus stages, and that animated intro, it's safe to say that Sonic's first CD adventure took many by surprise. Critics were mostly into it, with GamePro giving the platformer a perfect 5 out of 5, and game players handing over a score of 91% and calling it the best CD game of the year. Electronic Gaming Monthly's Ed Samarad called the game excellent, 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 and said it's the best version of Sonic to date. Game Informer also liked the game, warning that Sonic is back with a vengeance. They liked that Sega gave Sonic more human qualities, such as having a girlfriend and caring about the planet. The real story is Die Hard Game Fan, who initially gave the game 4 perfect scores. That's 4 critics giving it 100%. Making it the best reviewed game in Game Fan's history. The perfect game for the Sega CD, they called it. Heaven on Earth has arrived in the form of Sonic CD. To call this game a masterpiece is a gross understatement. Only 2 months after giving the game 4 perfect scores, Die-hard game fan came back with a revised review. Instead of being the perfect game for the Sega CD, the editors bumped the scores from 100s down to the mid-70s range. What went wrong? Well, they changed the soundtrack. Why? Why would anybody change the music in Sonic CD? Wondered Kaylee. The magazine hammered Sega for the boneheaded decision and ultimately decided that this change alone took the game from 100% all the way down to 78%. This is one of the biggest overreactions of all time, suggesting that changing the music was enough to ruin the entire experience. I agree, the Japanese soundtrack is better, but how perfect can a game be if changing the soundtrack alone drops it from 100% all the way down to 78%? Collectively, when we add all the other magazines together, Sonic CD averages out to a respectable 87%. More than 20 years after it first hit the Sega Genesis, Sonic the Hedgehog 3 has taken a hit in popularity. Many of today's gamers seem to think that this was the first sign that Sega was going to spend the next 20 years bumbling around with the Sonic brand. But that was definitely not the consensus at the time, or it was impossible to find a score lower than 90%. Electronic Gaming Monthly gave the game not one, but 2 perfect scores, making Sonic 3 one of their best reviewed games of all time. Sonic 3 is simply the perfect Sonic game, raves Ed. It beats out all the previous Sonics with outstanding graphics, more hidden items, and new items like the many types of shields. Danyan agreed, saying that Sonic 3 completely blows away everything you've ever seen in an action game. Die Hard Game Fan didn't give the game unanimous 100%, but they also didn't revise their score 2 months later, giving it a range of 90% all the way up to 94%. The editors agreed that you can't really argue with the design and quality of Sonic 3. Brody notes that it's games like this that are going to make Sega hard to beat in 94 and beyond. Well, not too far beyond 94. This is a sentiment shared across the industry. Computers and Video Games gave Sonic 3 a 94%, the same score as Mean Machine's Sega. GamePro gave it a perfect score and said that Sonic 3 proves that you can teach an old hedgehog new and exciting tricks. Believe it or not, the stellar reviews bring the game's average to 94%. By far the best received Sonic game of all time. A weird mixture of expansion pack and mod, Sonic and Knuckles gave fans a brand new and exciting way to experience the Sonic the Hedgehog trilogy. This weirdly shaped cartridge allowed players to not only race through a bunch of brand new levels, but it also gave you an opportunity to use Knuckles in the older Sonic games. This is an incredibly cool idea, even if some of the critics were a little burned out by the Sonic formula. I feel like I've been here too many times, laments diehard game fan Skid. His colleagues were a little more generous with scores, but a lot of the excitement came from the technology. This type of backward compatibility has been the norm in the computer game world for a while. Hopefully it'll catch on with video games too, explains Mr. Goo. Imagine a backward compatible Phantasy Star card or something. Mr. Goo must not remember the power base converter, which brought backwards compatibility to the Sega Genesis, including Phantasy Star. Electronic Gaming Monthly was a lot more enthusiastic with their praise. Once again, Ed Samarad gave the game a perfect 10 out of 10 and called it the ultimate Sonic game. Both Al and Sushi X agreed that the Sonic formula was getting a bit stale, with the 2 critics starting out their reviews with almost the exact same wording. Next Generation explained it succinctly. Basically, this is the same Sonic game that Sega has sold for the last 3 years, just wrapped up better with a prettier ribbon. Reviews were strong across the board, but down a bit from the highs of Sonic 3. This weird expansion pack averaged a total of 90%. By 1996, most magazines were quick to dismiss Sonic's 16-bit outing. Instead of reviewing the Genesis version of Sonic 3D Blast, critics opted for the shinier Saturn port. Pretty much everybody was ready to move on to a next-generation Sonic, something we wouldn't see until Sonic Adventure in 1999. It's a shame that after so many great 16-bit games, Sonic had to go out with a whimper. Sonic & Knuckles was the perfect ending to the 2D series, and since there aren't many reviews to analyze, maybe we'll just forget Sonic 3D Blast even exists and close the whole thing down. Actually, that's a pretty good idea. Hey, thanks for watching our retrospective. If you still want to sift through more old-school Sonic reviews, then I recommend checking out defunctgames.com. I'll leave links in the description to our review breakdowns of the first few Sonic games. We also looked at Sonic Spinball and Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine, which we didn't get to in this video. We'll be back tomorrow with a review of Heart and Slash on PlayStation 4, and then we're gonna really jump back into reviews next week. Oh, if you haven't heard, we're looking for voice actors for the Adventures of GamePro series, so please check out that video. Just too much stuff to talk about in this ending. Okay, I'm done, but I suggest you click the subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then.